That is definitely going in the top 10 worst pick I have done this year. That is the dumbest pick, thinking Ikram Aliskerov, who to me, I'm starting to question his chin, and I put it in the title, and I'm going to tell you why I think that is very suspect. Ikram Aliskerov got caught with an uppercut against Khamzat Chimaev, but that was when he was going forward. In this fight, this happened after he got rocked, and that's not the problem. The problem is, I'm starting to believe Ikram Aliskerov can't take a punch like a cross from these middleweights on the chin. And to be fair, he don't even look like a big middleweight. Maybe welterweight would have been a better weight class for him, and I wouldn't be surprised in the near future if he moved down. But to be fair, I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. You're fighting Robert Whittaker, who's in the top 5. Like, most people, if you are smart and you use your brain properly, which I didn't do, you're going with Robert Whittaker, who's had a proper training camp. Yeah, he weren't training for Aliskerov, but he was training for Khamzat Chimaev, preparing to stop takedowns, and a guy who's quite sloppy with his striking. That was embarrassing by Aliskerov. I'm sorry, it really was, because yeah, he was training for a different type of guy, but it's not the first time I've seen this happen with him, with his chin looking a bit off. Go back and watch the first round with Phil Hawes. Yes, he was landing against Phil Hawes, but he took a while to get going, and he looked a bit slow and quite stiff earlier on. He isn't a very fluid striker at the start. He kind of grows into the fight as a fighter. That's his type of thing, where he grows into the fight, and then when he starts landing his combinations, he starts mixing it up, and then his whole brain and fight IQ goes to a different level. But when he starts off quite slow, this is going to haunt him, because when you come up against a guy who's going to push the pace early, you're going to struggle. And Robert Whittaker did it. And the way he did it was very smart, because he was adapting to what Ikram was doing. Ikram, a lot of these Russian fighters, you start to see now an evolution. It's not just I'm going to hug you and hold you on the floor. You've got some of them who are the kickers. You've got your Umar, you've got your Usman Nurmagomedov. You've got those guys, Islam Makhachev, who look to kick, and they don't just look to just shoot for the legs and just hug you on the ground. Boring. No one wants to see that. He doesn't do that. So he's throwing a lot of these naked kicks, but you're coming up against a high-level kickboxer. Why would you even bother to start throwing the kicks the way he was doing them? They weren't even with setups. They were telegraphed. They were naked leg kicks. They weren't set up with anything. It was just pointless. And you're coming up against Robert Whittaker, who has struggled against a bigger guy in Duplessis, who's going to push him backwards and not allow him to use these kicks. And to be fair, Robert Whittaker didn't really need to use that many kicks in this. But that was because Ikram was showing him what he was going to do. And as he landed the kick, as he threw the kick and planted his foot down, Robert Whittaker knows, right, as soon as that leg comes up, counter him, because he's not throwing off his kick with his hands or anything. So he's just throwing these naked kicks, and he's not biting into his gum shield. He just looked a bit soft out there. I don't know how to describe it any more than that. So for me, Robert Whittaker, he's got to fight Sean Strickland. I know we all want him to have a title shot, Sean Strickland, but Sean Strickland likes to make money. Might as well just fight Robert Whittaker on the sidelines, because it would just make sense to do that. No point waiting for him to sit out with whatever happens with Israel and Duplessis, because you never know. Injury could happen. Someone wants to take a year off, or it's not worth the wait. Look at Aspinall and John Jones. That saga was never going to end. It really isn't. So, Ikram, for me, I'm probably looking at him fighting an unranked opponent. I wouldn't rush him back into the rankings. I would say, let's have a look at him fighting a Bruno Ferreira. Robert Whittaker, there's not really much you can say, because he's meant to do it. If he loses, people are like, well, what's happened there? But another reason why I'm saying the chin's a bit suspect. When was the last time Robert Whittaker got a finish? Early 2017. We're in 2024. And it was by an uppercut. And against Khamzat Chimaev, it was against an uppercut. And fair enough, Khamzat Chimaev knocking you out, not too bad. He's sloppy but has power. But Whittaker, he's not really known for getting finishes. He really ain't. Maybe back in the day he did, but not this Whittaker. It's very technical, 1-2 head kick, and just staying out of range and being very clean with his boxing. He is not a guy who puts people away, which is why I am questioning Aliskerov's chin. But anyways, yeah. Interesting fight. But Whittaker isn't going to get much credit out of it because it was short notice. So on paper, it looks good, but he won't get the credit he deserves. Right, Pavlovich versus Volkov. Oh my God. I did think it was a bad matchup for him on paper, but I just thought after that Tom Aspinall fight, he would actually march people down completely and stay doing that. But I feel like because of the damage he took from Tom Aspinall when he got blitzed, he's a bit scared to push forward and like completely like follow up with his strikes, because for once in Pavlovich's career, I never thought I'd see it. I never thought I'd see a 260-pound like Pavlovich throwing leg kicks. I know he's put on a bit of muscle, but he's still like that blocky type of heavyweight. It's not the heavyweight who throws the low kicks, which he didn't really do, but it looked like sometimes on the end of a combination, or maybe twice, he would look to throw a head kick against Volkov. And to be fair, that's probably not the smartest idea to do against a guy who's probably got about 5 inches of height on you. And about the range, I thought because he's got that long reach, he won't be able to bully him with it. Well, yes, he was. And I could not believe it, because you had Volkov literally taking the out of him, because he was literally parrying his hand when he wasn't throwing a strike. I don't know if he was trying to read that he was going to do it and then going for it. It didn't look like that. There was a few times in that fight where he looked to do that upwards, like hammer fist block, and sometimes a hammer fist strike to the glove of Pavlovich to probably destroy the rhythm. And those kicks he was doing were brutal, because he'd throw the high kick and then follow up with like his cross off it, and he was like switching stance. Pavlovich could not compute this. And that was one of the best wins in Volkov's career, because the way he did it. And you know, all of that hype about people saying how, oh, he beats me in sparring. We've been Ryan Garcia'd all over again, in terms of he's probably just saying that as a joke. But because I'm not Russian, I can't speak Russian, and I don't understand Russian, I've been baited by that, because apparently I saw something in the comments where people do that as a, like, what's the word? Not controversy. I've forgotten it. It'll come to me in a minute. When you exaggerate a word. I can't remember the word. My brain's all over the place. But yeah, that's what he was pretty much doing, and I fell for it. Because Volkov, this new version of Volkov, like, he's had like a career resurgence where he was good, but it depends on what Volkov would show up. And this Volkov recently, really good. The only guys he's lost to recently, Tom Aspinall, Ciryl Gane. Yeah, he's a loss to Blades and he's a loss to Derek Lewis. That Blades fight now, looking back at that, I would give him a good run for his money. Like, I think he could win that fight now. Like, he stopped Alexander Romanov getting the takedown by cheating. I know that. But Pavlovich has shown that he struggles against technical heavyweights. I'm not going to call him a fraud, because he's been doing all the fat heavyweights. Like, he's been walking them down and bullying guys where ones that would give you a run for your money on the feet who like to brawl. Like Taito Ivasa, as bad as he is, like, technically, he's one of those weird fighters where, because of the power he has, if he engages in a brawl with you and gets in the pocket, he is extremely dangerous. But Pavlovich, for me, I'm a bit concerned, because I'm starting to think now, I know he's lost 2 fights in a row, but they're to good. One to the interim champion and to Volkov, which to me is not bad, because Volkov to me was a bad matchup and Tom Aspinall was just the levels above him. You have people already saying that he's the potential future GOAT of heavyweight, which I think he's going to do. But I think the fight we need to look at for Pavlovich is a Ciryl Gane. And I know you might think, why would you do that? Well, both of them are coming off a loss. Well, no, they're not, actually. I forgot. Ciryl Gane beat Sergei Spivak. I keep forgetting about that. But I don't want to give him Jailton Almeida. Jailton Almeida deserves to have a massive step up. Like, I wouldn't be opposed to seeing him against Volkov at this point, because that would be a weird matchup. Whereas Ciryl Gane and Pavlovich, that fight should have been made. I'm surprised it hasn't happened. I do think Ciryl Gane can win that fight, but it's a very hard matchup, because Ciryl Gane can get complacent and get put down. Like, look at the Taito Ivasa. He made him a bit difficult, even though he should have been like a walk through the park, which he was beating him up, body shots, kick into the body, but he drops the hands a bit low and can get a bit complacent. And you do that against Pavlovich, he's got the power to one punch out you, because Volkov's chin has improved. Like, I don't even think he's got a bad chin, because look at the punches he was eating. Like, He blocked a lot. He was turning his back. He was avoiding them. With that good height, it's quite easy. But he would get a few that would go through the guard and it weren't doing any damage to him. And that's because I think he has got a good chin. He's not really been known. Like, think of a guy who's knocked him out. You can't. Derek Lewis. Fair enough. But that was in, like, the last few seconds. Like, to me, that was fluky. Chael Sonnen against Anderson Silva type of vibes. But still, great chin. When has he been knocked out since then? And that was years ago. So, yeah. For Volkov, I'd like to see him against a guy like that because I think Jailton Almeida is able to like pick up big, fat heavyweights and beefy ones like Curtis Blades, and he's able to ragdoll Romanov, who's meant to be way bigger than he is. That is the fight I want to see, and the range of Volkov, how well can he defend the takedowns? Interesting. And if he beats the Volkov, we're starting to look at, after Tom Aspinall gets his title shot, which seems like it's never going to happen, he'll get his chance. But as long as he stays active and be's in the mix, he'll get the chance eventually. But for me, Volkov, he is probably the real dark horse of the division. Like, he wins a lot of fights. He might have one loss here and there, but it seems like that's not happening anymore. He's actually going through opponents and he's doing it easy. Apart from Tom Aspinall, but I've told you before how good that guy is. No, like, shame in losing a fight like that. But honestly, a good performance by him. I just like the amount of ways he was able to use his range and pretty much kick Pavlovich and just make him stationary, because he's doing well against heavyweights with no footwork who he can just plod towards, and he can just become, his opponent becomes flat-footed and tries to engage in a brawl, where Pavlovich has got the range advantage, which makes it easier to land. Plus, he's got the power, like stupid levels of power. They're good matchups, but for me, this one was really hard. And it showed, getting 30-27 as well. But anyways, yeah. Right, this fight here of Kelvin Gastelum and Daniel Rodriguez. Honestly, I can't really give credit to Gastelum, because as we know, the fight should never happen. And Rodriguez is kind of like a yes man to the UFC, which, fair enough, he's going to get paid for it, but like, look at that fight of Li Jingliang. He just took it. He didn't really care. Like, he'll fight. He's not scared of people. But it seems like he'll just do what he has to do. Because he shouldn't have had to do that against Li Jingliang. Which he shouldn't have won, by the way. And he shouldn't have to have fought this. Like, how can you miss the weight like that and still be allowed to fight? God can only tell you. So, for me, Kelvin Gastelum, he was struggling earlier on. And he just looked beefy and fat. And and Rodriguez just looked like a small welterweight out there. Like, he just looked small and it didn't look fair. It looked like two different weight classes. I don't know what Kelvin Gastelum's been eating. It just looked like he turned up and he just could not be arsed. Like, turning up to work and just thinking he's going to get away with it, which a lot of fighters wouldn't, but he did. And he won. So when he started to grapple on the ground, fair enough. It was an improvement. But I'm not impressed. I can't sit here and say, oh, that was great, because he was meant to be at welterweight, and I don't even know. Is he going to fight a middleweight now? Is he going to fight a welterweight now? Daniel Rodriguez, I'm starting to think he's getting old now, and if I was him, I know he's coming off 3 losses. I would honestly look at him going to a BKFC. That would be good for him, because I know he doesn't have that much power, but he's got that style suited for it. Like, just a lot of jabs and very good counters at times, and he doesn't get into a brawl in the pocket. He'll land a combination. He'll just keep moving out of that range. So if you really wanted to give him another fight in the UFC, which you probably will want to give him an eco price. And I say give him an eco price because I wouldn't want to see him against Dalby. I know Dalby lost, but that's just, he's lost to him before. It just don't make sense to do it again. But that fight there I've just mentioned, I wouldn't mind seeing. And for Kelvin Gastelum, again, I don't know what weight class he wants to fight in. I'm just going to assume he wants to fight a middleweight. I would want to see him fight Kevin Holland. I think that's a very interesting fight. And you might be like, why are you rewarding him with that type of fight? I want to see good matchups. I'm sick and tired of seeing boring decisions because of the padding of the gloves, which seems kind of ironic now, how we're seeing, I believe, less padding in the gloves, less knockouts. But for me, that's an interesting fight to do, where Kevin Holland could get held down on the ground, but I don't think that's how Gastelum, the majority of the time, wants to fight. And even then, on the ground, Kevin Holland's BJJ game can be good. And it's only the times he's been held down by good wrestlers in the division. It's not like he's getting held down by bum wrestlers who can't hold positions. So I think Gastelum would be an interesting fight, because I think they'd be standing for a lot of the fight. Right, I hate to say it, but I'm going to say it. Watching this fight here looked like match fixing, but obviously I can't say it was. But from Shara Magomedov, that performance looked very mid. I'm surprised. Out of all the fighters you could give a bonus, I would honestly not be looking at giving Shara a bonus for that. Like, really? When you have Nasrat Haqparast, someone like that deserved it. But anyways, Antonio Trócoli comes out first round, catches him with a good right cross. Not rocks him, but lands clean and starts backing him up against the cage. He then grapples and holds him against the cage. Go back and look at Shara Magomedov against Bruno Silva. This guy is not Dagestani. He cannot grapple. He can elbow from the bottom like he's Tony Ferguson, but he can't get up. And Antonio Trócoli just decided, I'm just going to hug you. The UFC have called me up on short notice. I don't want to ruin this prospect and ruin the momentum, which, again, he was never on the contender or anything. Like, Shara Magomedov just came out of nowhere, which seems a bit weird because, like, it was just the most random. It's like they found some Dagestani fighter who looked interesting with these good KOs and just brought him up. Like, God knows where he came from. Like, the promotions. Like, he wasn't even hyped up. He just came out of nowhere. And on the feet, he looks really good. But in this fight here, he looked mid. He was doing those kicks to the body. But this Andrew Tate lookalike, he pretty much just stood there and just allowed himself to get beaten up. Like, if he just went out there and just carried on doing what he did in the first round by just hugging him, yeah, it looked boring. And, oh yeah, by the way, he was about to get a takedown and then he grabs the cage. And Mark Goddard, in controversy as per usual, doesn't give anything away. So he doesn't give away a point. He doesn't give the position back. Like, as in, like, to the ground or anything. He doesn't let him take the back and whatever. I just don't know how to describe his performance, Mark Goddard. But Antonio Trócoli, he's just washed. He looked like he shouldn't be there. He was out of place, even though he had an all right first round. And I believe if he could just go out there and just look for takedowns, he could win. But no, he decided, I'm going to be an NPC robot. I'm just going to stand there and let this guy hit me and give myself more brain damage than I already get by doing MMA. Make it make sense. So, Shara Magomedov, honestly, we need to look at having him fight against a grappler. I'm not even joking. I don't want to do it to Paul Craig. I was about to say give him Paul Craig. But then I realised that if you give him Paul Craig, his chin cannot hold out. And Bo Nickel called him out, but I know what he's doing there. He knows he'd have a field day. He'd run through this guy and submit him in the first round in under 2 minutes because he knows he ain't got any grappling. But he will stay away from that fight. And you know what? If you want to give Shara Magomedov an interesting fight that will test him a lot, give him a Chris Weidman. He would give him a run for his money. Yeah, his chin can, well, not his chin, but his durability is fading. But that is the type of fight where Weidman has got a good chance with his grappling. But he has to be wary about his chin just in case that Shara actually hits him. But I'm not saying he's a glass door. I'm just saying with how hard Magomedov can hit, he can knock him out. But then again, he won't stand there like a standing target doing nothing. He'll actually try. But yeah, I wouldn't mind seeing a Weidman against him. So for his opponent, Trócoli, I don't want to see him fight again. I hate saying it, but this guy has to go. He needs to be cut. Because that was the most embarrassing thing I've ever seen. Right. Volkan Oezdemi versus Johnny Walker. They both got a fight bonus. Ooh, Volkan Oezdemi did. And I don't know why I didn't see this coming. Johnny Walker's always been this guy where never been a technical fighter. He's in there being too goofy, messing about, smiling and laughing before the fight. When I don't know what there is to laugh about. You're getting brain damage. And you're getting brutally knocked out. Like, each knockout for Johnny Walker becomes a meme. He never gets knocked out like a normal person. He gets knocked out and his body has to either just like slam on the floor and put him in like the most trollable position. And he's an entertaining person, don't get me wrong. He probably is a nice person, but that's irrelevant because Volkan Oezdemi, a lot of power. And from the second minute, if I could do a predictions thing in play where I go like based off what I've seen after the first few seconds, I would immediately say Volkan Oezdemi was going to win. Johnny Walker did not look to throw with his hands. He looked to keep leg kicking when he is not that guy. Yeah, you did it to Anthony Smith. It'll work against a guy who doesn't push the pace and a guy who looks too scared to fight and starts bringing up his family mid-fight. Volkan Oezdemi, solid guy. He ain't the type of guy to start bringing up his family. He's just going out there looking for the knockout. And that's what he did. Marching him down and pretty much rocks him. And as he's down to the ground, referee, again, forgetting that he's meant to be a referee, ends up letting him get clobbered in his chin and now making his chin even more compromised than it already was. Giving him, I don't even know what type of person we could compare him to. His chin is the equivalent of a McKinney. No, I can't even think he's in his own category. You can't even compare him to anyone else because that chin is just cooked. And it always will be, and there's no going back. Volkan Oezdemi, who would I like to see him fight? Maybe a Khalil Rountree. I know he's out for now, but he'll probably want to break after that. He took no damage, but he probably will want to break. Maybe his leg's a little bit sore after a few of those leg kicks. I know it didn't last so long, but that can happen. But Johnny Walker, I'm sorry, your chin is cooked. Like, he broke his nose against Magomed Ankalaev, another brutal finish. And now, I don't even want to put him against Dominic Reyes, but I feel like I kind of have to. Because if you're not going to do that, I've already said I want to see Waldo Cortez Acosta tie to Ivasa. So that's the type of fight I want to see, but I'm thinking now, because of how shy Walker is, and he likes to be more technical than he should be instead of being raw and using his genetics. Imagine being 6'5" or 6'6", and your chin is cooked. It just doesn't make sense, but anyways, yeah. I wouldn't mind seeing that fight with Dominic Reyes. That's the type of fight to make for him. Oezdemi, you've got options, like I've mentioned, but Khalil Rountree would be the way to go. Right, Nasrat Haqparast versus Jared Gordon. Like, when is it going to end for this guy? As in Jared Gordon, like, how many times is he going to get robbed? Like, he has been so unfortunate, and he is taking a lot of damage. Like, on his body at the age of 35. The Mark Madsen, that was a good win. But the Bobby Green, like, he was growing into the fight and then gets headbutted. Paddy Pimblett, one of the worst robberies we've seen in history. Nasrat Haqparast, they're pushing a high pace. He looks like he's losing the first round, even though it's close. And Nasrat's trying to land that uppercut whilst Jared Gordon's pretty much landing those jabs to the body and looking to shoot for the single. But he never really looked to clear the other leg. It looked like he tried to do it, to push his back up against the cage and do what he did against Pimblett by hugging him against the cage. But then eventually Haqparast will escape that position, and then you're seeing Jared Gordon work the hooks. When the hooks started landing, you're seeing that cut and scarring happening below the orbital. And what that was allowing Jared Gordon to do is cut off the cage and circle him off and keep landing that hook, whilst pushing that fast pace and giving him opportunities to try and set up takedowns. That was a very good performance by Jared Gordon. But unfortunately, I'll say it again, I don't know what's wrong with the guy in terms of what people don't like about him. The judges have got a bias, he's old. Where in the right mind do they give that to Haqparast? Because he had a good first round, but that's it. Because in that third round, he was getting better, but it weren't enough. Like, Jared Gordon just looked like he outworked him in that third round than he did in the second. And he was looking to level change, and Haqparast was struggling to land that uppercut. So, poor judging. Felipe Lima versus Naimov. Oh my God. I hate to say it early, but this guy, I'm not going to shout and say, oh my God, future champion yet, not future champion. But this guy is a guaranteed top 10 bantamweight contender. 100%. This Lima guy, a few days' notice, comes up against Naimov, a weight bully, who's already beaten some big names in like Nathaniel Wood. Jamie Malak is a bit like meh, but he's a good striker, and he was winning that fight until the knockout. And he's also beaten, well, to be fair, the other guys, one of them was a bum. But that's not the point. Like, Naimov is a hard guy to beat. And the weight difference, the first round, he came out like lightning fast, chewing up that leg. You can see he did not like the pace. A lot of front kicks going forward. But then round 2, he kind of slowed down. But whilst he was slowing down, he was now allowing Naimov to start being more active. And then when he gets the takedown, which he did at the end of round 1, it made people think he won it. But I don't think he did, because that work that Lima did early looked dangerous. Like, you could tell the shots probably didn't hurt him too much, but he could feel them, like they were landing. But the reason I say they don't hurt him too much is because he's too small. Like, this guy, thank God he won this fight, because it's going to give him a whole lot of confidence. If you can do it to a guy who can fight a lightweight, who's quite big, imagine what he can do to proper bantamweights. Like, if he's confident in grappling with this guy, which he did struggle to get takedowns, but the way he got the finish in the third round was, one, that proves how important the coach is, because if that coach doesn't say that, probably comes out passive again and gets pushed back and doesn't, like, get that back take. But it was so smart what he did, because his back's up against the cage. Naimov sees an advantage to go for that, like, inside trip, so he goes for the inside trip. But because he fully commits towards it without keeping his balance, because he's anticipating that he's going to go forward because he's wrapped his leg around the inside and gone around the back of the ankle, his opponents then like leaned his back into the cage and then broke that grip by throwing him, because he's pretty much going with all the momentum. So if he just leans his body into the cage and allows him to escape by just throwing his body downwards, all that momentum's going to like fly down to the ground. And it did. And as soon as he took the bat, I thought this fight was over, because this guy, his jiu-jitsu looks really good, because it wasn't just a normal, oh, I've got your back and I'm going to submit you. He pretty much got his hooks in when both, like when his opponent was leaning into the cage. Do you understand how much flexibility you need to have to do that? You need a lot. And the way he was able to do it was just so slick. And Naimov didn't look to defend the hands at all. So really, he pretty much threw that away at the end, because he didn't defend it. And by the time he's locked it in, that choke is so deep and he's pulling that squeeze, you have to tap. You have to, because there's nothing you can do. He was in a position where he pretty much got like checkmated. Game, set, and match. So for me, I hope he doesn't get pushed too early, but I wouldn't mind seeing him having like a harder bantamweight fight, because I think if you give him like an easy bantamweight, he's going to run through him. Like, yeah, he won the belt, an octagon, but it was like his first fight and it was in a title fight, which I get why you can do it, because you knew how good he was beforehand, but I don't think he'll get a ranked opponent. So you know what? If you really want to test the skill of this guy, I would actually look at giving him like a Brad Katona. But then again, that's going to be a more boring fight. If you want entertainment, I would look at a Daniel Marcos. That would be an interesting fight. But I don't think they'll do any of them. I think he'll get like a very low ranked guy and come in as like a minus 500 favourite. Like, I can just see him getting a fight against. I'm trying to think, what type of guy would they give him? Like a Chad and Helaiga. Like a guy like that. I could just see that happening. But there is a few guys out there. Like, if you don't want to do Daniel Marcos, fair enough. But I'm thinking you got to give this guy a push. Like, that Naimov guy is so dangerous. But there's so many bantamweights. So you got Taylor Lapalus that you can have a fight with. You could also have it with Rinya Nakamura. There's a lot of good ones there. But it's all about picking the right one. Like a Brady Hayes stand. That would be a very interesting fight. I'd like to see that, actually. Brady Hayes stand against Felipe Lima. The entertainment value, the pace might be a problem, and that's a good matchup for High Stand in a weird way. Because, yeah, his chin, he can get dropped, but he's just non-stop pressure and cardio. And if you pressure a guy like that and don't allow him to use as many kicks as he'd want to do, you're going to put him in positions that he doesn't want to be. And he's got a very, like, offensive ground game. Like, he isn't just lying down like an Naimov. He's always going to be looking for that submission, which would then allow his opponent to also look for submissions and defend. So it'll be like a jiu-jitsu game on the ground, but on the feet, he'll get cooked. But eventually it will go down to the ground, because Haystand will shoot in early. He kind of reminds me a bit like Gamrot, where he gets dropped in every fight as well. But yeah, that's the fight I'd want to see. And for his opponent, who would I want to see? Naimov. You know what? We should do Jonathan Pearce versus him. That's an interesting fight because with Jonathan Pearce, he's going to look to grapple. Naimov will also look to grapple, but I think his striking threat on the feet can cause severe problems for him. So I would like to see that fight next. Right, Rinat Fakhretdinov versus Nicolas Dalby. Oh my god. The bias from the judging on this card was as clear as day. For me, Dalby should have won this fight, and people be like, how dare you say that Dalby won this fight? How can you say he won rounds 2 and 3? Well, maybe because he actually looked to strike, whereas Rinat was holding, but he wasn't getting any like good positions on the ground. It was a lot of hugging against the cage, and it wasn't even Dalby like on his butt on the cage. It was kind of like clinching, cage stalling. Holly Holm's a fan of this, and pretty much Dalby, even from them positions, was outworking him. He was being a bit cringe by like breathing like that. I don't know where he got that from. Like, I don't remember him breathing like that so much, but it works for him. He likes doing it, clearly, but it just looked a bit strange, some Wim Hof method or something. But Rinat, apart from that knockdown in the first round, what did he do? And I'm starting to think that this Rinat guy is good, but I'm starting to think, I think I'm rating him a little bit too highly. Like, he slows down a lot, and Dalby was doing things like kneeing to the body, kicking him with the front kicks, pushing him, teeping him. That works. But the problem with him is he lacks finishing ability most of the time, and people can find him a bit boring because he just pushes the pace. He doesn't really throw a lot of shots with power, but that's just the guy he is. So for Rinat, Kalen Williams would be perfect. He's got extremely good takedown defense. It will give him a chance of getting ranked. Plus, Rinat is a guy who in the first round is very dangerous. He has a lot of power, but Kalen Williams also has a good chin as well. So it creates a matchup where I think it finishes there. I don't think that's one that goes to a decision unless Rinat hugs him and holds him against the cage. But you've got to realise, if he tries to do that, I think he's more likely to get a submission in that fight because Kalen Williams hasn't come up against a guy who's going to shoot on him like a guy like Rinat would do and immediately try and advance to the back. He hadn't like come against a guy like Rinat's his own gravy. I don't know how to describe it. But yeah, I think that would be interesting. And for Dalby, he's kind of old now, so it's kind of hard like giving him fights, but because it wasn't a bad loss when you actually think about it, like you could argue he won that fight. So if you want to give him, I'm not going to say a push because that wouldn't make sense, but maybe, and I know you might not like this fight, Neil Magny. But again, if I'm a matchmaker, you're just writing a boring fight there. So if you want to do one more interesting, maybe Alizé Zaleski. That would be an interesting fight you could do with Dalby because of the pace that he puts on him, but how dangerous Zaleski is. Like, the guy will kick Strickland. I know he weren't winning that fight at that point, but that's what I mean. He can pull out weird things in fights. He has moments, almost killing Benoit Saint-Denis in that cage. He also looked like he hurt Randy Brown in the second round and almost got a submission until he bottled it and then gave away his back. That's an interesting fight that I think Dalby can win, but will be posed with a threat of getting like knocked down or something in it. So yeah. Muin Gafurov versus Kang. Oh my god. Muin Gafurov, he's very predictable, but Kang, he's just too old. Like, his career was wasted because of military service, but what can you do? If you're from South Korea, you don't have a choice. So he had to go and do that. And in this fight here, he pretty much was getting bullied with the striking, and when he gets to the mount, it seems like he just makes small like decisions that cost him, like being too high on the shoulder, allowing his opponent to escape, like not grabbing onto the arm to try and get that arm bar. He just makes fights harder than they really need to be. And his striking, I never thought was that bad because before those last two fights, he was looking like he was going to be dangerous, but I really don't think he is anymore. So for Gafurov, who do I want to see him fight? An interesting one I believe we could do with Gafurov could be, and hear me out, a Marcus McGee. I know he's coming on a 3-fight win streak. He wants to fight higher up and try and strike, and his striking's dangerous. And the thing with Muin and Gafurov, he sits down on all of his punches, which allows him to be countered with takedowns easy. But I don't see Marcus McGee like looking for them type of things, which is why I think that's actually a good fight to do. Whereas with a Kang, he is old at this point. Magomed Gadzhiyasulov versus Brendson Ribeiro. Oh my god, this guy is one of the most boring fighters I've ever seen. Not only that, like, Bilal Muhammad would give this guy a run for his money in terms of entertainment value. And with Gadzhiyasulov, again, I think he got a bit exposed in that fight. I know he won the fight, but it was not a good start. Again, like, he's very beatable because on the feet, his striking isn't that good. He doesn't know how to defend leg kicks. With the range of Brendson Ribeiro, he was getting bullied with it in terms of he didn't know what to do on the feet. And if you look at his fight in the Contender, you would be like, oh my god, he could outschool this guy. Which is why I didn't think he would get a knockout if he won the fight. I thought he would win by a decision, but obviously I picked Ribeiro. As in, like, if Gadzhiyasulov was going to win, it would have been by a decision. Because he's that type of grappler who doesn't really know how to do jiu-jitsu. I don't know how, like, there was moments in that fight where he almost got him in an arm triangle and he like slid out and just was like, I don't want to lose the position. I'm too scared of this guy on the feet. Let me just mess about on the ground. And no, let me just lie on top of him on the ground. Whereas Ribeiro, he had a good start. Leg kicking him, got that guillotine, but again, making a guy tap to a guillotine, unless you're Charles Oliveira, unless you've got like that tight squeeze, people are not going to tap. Like, you kind of have to put people to sleep with them sometimes because people can just hold and just try and fight their way out and get their head out. So, for Magomed Gadzhiyasulov, again, he's in light heavyweight, which was kind of a division where, for the unranked, I don't really see that much talent, whereas in the ranked, that's where all the talent is. So, Magomed Gadzhiyasulov, I'm trying to think of a fighter you could give him. That'd be interesting. You know what? A Ming Yang Zhang. Do that. That is a dangerous fight for him because he can grapple very well. He has got stupid amounts of power, more than that Brendson Ribeiro. And if he lands you clean onto your chin with like a hook counter, he'll put him out cold. So I want to see that fight next. Whereas for his opponent Ribeiro, I wish Jimmy Crute was still fighting. Nah, actually, no, because he'll just get ragdolled on the floor. Datan Young, that'd be interesting because he's been fighting, apart from Devin Clark, 2 ranked guys. Well, not Jacoby anymore, but he was. And I believe it's about time we see Datan Young have a fair matchup. Devin Clark was, but I mean, we need to see another. So we should do Datan Young against Ribeiro for me. And then Chang Ho Lee versus Long Zhao. Oh my god. Yes, it was a close fight, but Chang Ho Lee clearly lost that fight. Chang Ho Lee is one of those fighters where he's not that good, but his cardio and his pace like carries him. Like, his ability is just really not there. Like, Long Zhao was actually catching him with hook counters. He was backing him up against the cage. He was winning in the grappling exchanges. But where it went wrong, I don't know actually. I can't say where it went wrong because I don't think he won that fight. But he was like kneeing him in the body, and I think they were like really heavily favouring that, and they weren't really counting Long Zhao's strikes and work from the clinch because they might say quote quote not enough damage. They probably looked at his eye and thought, well, if his eye's bleeding like that, he's probably done more damage. When we all know that's not how it works. And one thing about Chang Ho Lee, for as good as his pace is, I've never seen it from him, but he slowed down in the 3rd round. And I think that can happen. If he comes up against a strong grappler who can pin him up against the cage and get takedowns, he will gas out. The only reason you don't see him gas out all the time is because he's not always on his back. A lot of the time he's on his feet, and then he gets like a second wind in the 3rd round. So matchmaking these is really hard because I'm like, Chang Ho Lee, he doesn't deserve to get a higher ranked opponent, but no, when I say ranked, like a higher echelon of opponent, but you have to give him that just because of what happened. Because he got the win, obviously. You can't just do it off my opinion. So, he's a bantamweight. What bantamweight do you think would be an interesting fight with Chang Ho Lee? I'm thinking someone who also wants to put on a high pace. So, for Chang Ho Lee, I doubt the UFC would want to do it. But a Jose Johnson. But then again, he could just get pieced up by a guy like that. So, no, Ricky Turcios. That would be an interesting fight because Chang Ho Lee pushing the pace. Ricky Turcios was shooting. That's a fight with a lot of takedowns and a lot of like output. So I wouldn't mind seeing that fight. And for Long Zhao, he'll probably get cut but doesn't deserve to be. Honestly, give him, if the UFC haven't cut him, Toshimi Kusama. That guy got knocked out by Rinya Nakamura and he got TK'd by Armfield, because I believe that's another fight where this guy here, he struggled with people backing him up a lot, but Long Zhao, he's not just a pure pressure fighter. He'll fight down the centre and he'll allow Kusama to kind of back him up at times. So I think that's the type of fight that'd be interesting, and that could have a finish written all over it, in my opinion. But yeah, that's it. Thank you for watching. Talk to you soon.